mynews.studio.
Picture this. Under ultraviolet light, you see snails glowing like tiny stars as they move through Polynesian forests. It almost sounds like something out of science fiction, but these creatures are very real. The big question is, how did they manage to return from the brink?
It's December 10th, 2025. Maybe we should start at the beginning. Why did these snails disappear in the first place? I mean, back in the 1980s and early 90s, French Polynesia lost almost all of its native Partula snails. What actually happened?
It all started with an ecological intervention that unfortunately didn't go as planned. Conservationists introduced the rosy wolf snail, hoping it would control the African giant land snail, which was itself invasive. But the plan backfired. The rosy wolf snail ended up preying on the native Partula snails instead, and populations that had survived for thousands of years were suddenly in danger. By the early 1990s, 15 species and subspecies existed only in captivity. The forests, which once echoed with life, went quiet.
The loss was more than just ecological, right? These snails played a really important role in their environment, breaking down decaying leaves, supporting forest health. And for the local communities, their shells had cultural significance, marking identity and tradition on each island. So, when the snails disappeared, it wasn't just a scientific loss.
Exactly. That's why the next step became a global mission. Starting in 1986, zoos across Europe and North America stepped in. Places like London, Edinburgh, St. Louis, Detroit, they turned into arks for these snails. The process was painstaking. Each individual was catalogued, bred, tracked, often one by hand.
And all of that effort, almost 40 years of breeding, right? That's a huge commitment for such a small animal. But how could scientists tell if their reintroduction was working? I mean, how do you keep tabs on thousands of tiny, mostly nocturnal snails in a rainforest?
That's where some clever thinking came in. Researchers started marking each zoo-bred snail with a tiny dot of ultraviolet reflective paint, sometimes called snail varnish. At night, under UV light, the marked snails would glow bright blue. So during nocturnal surveys, the researchers could spot these glowing stars as they moved through the leaves. And any snail that didn't glow, that one had to be wild-born.
And this year, just a few months ago, September 2025 to be exact, there was a breakthrough. For the first time in 40 years, teams on Moorea found adult Partula toeviana snails with no UV marks. These were born in the wild, not in zoos. Does that count as a real comeback?
It really does. It's a major milestone. Not only did they find wild-born Partula toeviana, but also the first wild-born Partula varia in over 30 years. Even better, the snails were showing up beyond the original release sites, a sign that the population could sustain itself. And just to give a sense of scale, over 7,000 snails from 10 species were released this year alone, bred across a dozen zoos worldwide.
That's the largest release they've ever done, right? But the impact goes even further. Partula toeviana was officially downlisted from extinct in the wild to critically endangered on the IUCN Red List. Is this the first time an invertebrate has made that kind of recovery?
Yes, it is. Most of the reintroduction success stories people hear about, like the California condor or the red wolf, involve birds or mammals. This is the first time an invertebrate has gone from extinct in the wild to having a wild population again. It really demonstrates that extinction doesn't have to be the end, even for species that aren't in the spotlight.
There's also something to be said for patience. This took 15 zoos, 3 continents, local governments, university researchers, pretty much everyone working together for nearly 40 years. No headlines, just steady, careful progress. Why does that approach matter so much?
Because, in most cases, extinction stories don't end well. Here, though, we see that long-term international collaboration can actually reverse the trend. It's also a reminder that zoos play a vital role in real conservation. Without these efforts, the snails would be lost forever.
And for the people of French Polynesia, it's not just about the snails. It's about restoring cultural heritage, improving forest health, and showing that nature can recover when given the right support. Do you think this approach could work for other species that are close to disappearing?
It's not a universal fix, but it does show that with enough time, resources, and coordination, even species that seem lost can return. As we face a global extinction crisis, these glowing snails are proof that hope and science together can change the outcome.
So, just to sum up, a single decision almost wiped out the Partula snails. But decades of global teamwork, persistence, and creative problem-solving brought them back. Now, wild-born snails are settling into Polynesian forests, visible under UV light, and proving that extinction isn't always final.
Thanks for joining us as we followed this journey from near loss to recovery. The story of the Partula snails is more than just a conservation win. It's a clear example of what's possible when people don't give up.
Thanks for listening. Today's episode was brought to you by mynews.studio. You can try it now for free.